Write something here. Some memories, though fleeting, burn like embers deep within the heart. Childhood, a place where time slowed, and dreams ran wild like the wind. On a golden field, two boys, Min and Toon, ran barefoot, chasing a paper kite. They had nothing but each other, and that was more than enough. No promises, no expectations, just laughter echoing through endless grass. In that moment, neither knew where life would take them. But the seed of something greater had been planted, a dream, perhaps, or something like it. There's nothing more powerful than a dream shared by two hearts. Beneath a rusted tin roof, two children sat side by side, one drawing with a stubby pencil, the other watching in awe. A dream of building something, a company that would help people like them. They had no money, no guidance, just imagination, and each other. Min's lines were crooked, the paper wrinkled, but his eyes shone with fire. Toon smiled quietly, as if believing made it real. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a vow. But it was a promise, spoken not in words, but in trust. Time can change people, but it can't erase the past. Years later, Min and Toon met again, no longer boys, but men with stories in their eyes. They sat at a quiet cafe table, where words were few but memories loud. Old dreams were dusted off. New ideas sparked. Min, with his gentle sincerity. Toon, polished, charismatic, but something behind his gaze had changed. A handshake between old friends can feel like home. Or a contract waiting to be broken. And though they didn't know it yet, this second beginning would carry a cost. It began in a modest room, where the furniture was second-hand and the air smelled of instant noodles and old books. Min typed away on a worn-out laptop. Toon paced the floor, his voice alive with ideas, plans, and ambition. They had no office, no capital, no investors, only a vision stitched together by late-night talks and caffeine. At times, Min questioned himself. Were they dreaming too big? But each time doubt crept in, Toon would laugh and say, "If we don't try, we'll never know what could have been." They pooled their savings. They stayed up through nights when sleep was a luxury. Min handled the coding, the logistics, the boring details. Toon charmed potential clients, painted the future with words that could sell hope to skeptics. And for a time, it worked. The first contract came in like rain on dry land. Small, but enough to breathe life into the company's name. They cheered, hugging like kids again. In that room, success wasn't measured in money, it was in belief. Two boys, now men, chasing the same kite, only this time, the sky felt closer. Success doesn't always arrive with trumpets and gold. Sometimes, it slips in like morning light, unnoticed until the room is already bright. Their startup, once a mere whisper between two boys, had become a name on people's lips. Contracts came. Clients praised. Investors finally took notice. They moved into a real office, glass walls, minimalist desks, a receptionist who smiled too perfectly. Min still wore the same clothes, still walked to work, still stayed late to fix bugs and clean up spreadsheets. But Toon had changed. His words were sharper now, coated in charm and polish. His laughter louder in meetings, but quieter when the two of them were alone. "You handle the backend, Min. I'll deal with the vision," he would say, with a hand on Min's shoulder that felt more like a pat than a gesture of trust. Min smiled, of course. He always did. He believed in the dream, even if it meant stepping further into the shadows to keep its light alive. But deep inside, a silence had started to grow, not between their voices, but between their hearts. Late at night, when the city slept, Min would look across the empty office, Toon's seat long cold, and wonder if they were still chasing the same kite. Or if one had already let go of the string. It started with whispers. Missing meetings. Changed numbers. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Min noticed the little things first, new business cards with only Toon's name, documents he wasn't copied on, deals being signed when he wasn't in the room. When he asked, Toon laughed it off. "Just simplifying the process," he'd say. "You focus on what you're good at." But what hurt wasn't the secrecy, it was the feeling of being slowly pushed out of the dream he helped build. One night, Min found a proposal in the trash, an investment pitch that listed Toon as the sole founder. His name, erased. The dream, rewritten. And still, he said nothing. Because some betrayals are so slow, so quiet, that by the time you realize it's happened, you're already standing alone. Toom met them in silence. Investors with sharp eyes, colder than glass. Behind closed doors, he signed the deal, a partnership that handed him control, and left Min in the dark. The signatures were swift. The smiles rehearsed. The ink that carved away years of trust dried before Min even knew the page existed. It was betrayal, not with knives, but pens. Not with rage, but indifference. And when Min finally heard the news, not from Toom, but from a client, his silence cracked. Not in screams, but in a single breath, held too long. That night, he walked the city alone. Rain fell gently, as if trying to wash away something that had already taken root. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Min stood in the office that used to be theirs. Now, his name was no longer on the door. He faced Toom, who leaned casually against the desk, untouched, unmoved. Why? Min asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Toom smiled. Not cruelly. Just tired. Because you don't belong in this world anymore, Min. You dream too small. There it was. Not anger. Not hatred. Just dismissal. Min didn't shout. Didn't beg. He looked around the room once more, the company they built, and walked away. Not because he lost. But because staying would mean losing himself. Without Min, the cracks spread quickly. Systems failed. Promises broke. Clients left. The dream, now hollowed by greed, could no longer stand. And still, Toom clung to his throne, blind to the collapse beneath him. The media turned. The investors vanished. One morning, he entered the office to find it empty. Chairs overturned. Papers scattered. Phones ringing into silence. And in the quiet, he saw the truth he had traded everything for. Power without trust. A crown made of ash. Min disappeared from the world. No interviews. No posts. No anger. He lived simply. A rented room above a tea shop. Old books. Quiet music. But silence isn't the same as peace. Some nights, he'd stare out the window, asking if all of it had meant anything. Was the dream a lie? Was the friendship ever real? But in that silence, something stirred. A question, softer than memory. If you could do it all again, would you still choose to believe? And his heart, quietly, said yes. He started again. Small. Teaching children to code at a community center. Building tools for others, not for profit, but for purpose. And slowly, joy returned, not in fireworks, but in quiet moments. A student saying thank you. A stranger smiling at his old project. Trust, once shattered, began to regrow, this time not as a business, but as something deeper. A life with meaning. Years later, people would ask, don't you regret it? The betrayal, the loss. Min would smile, not sadly, but sincerely. No, he'd say. Because I learned the most precious truth. Success built on betrayal crumbles. But a life built on integrity endures. And if I had to choose again, I would still believe, not in people, but in doing what is right, even when others do not. The kite of his youth still flies, somewhere. Not in the hands of others. But in the wind of every act of kindness, carried forward by the heart.